All right, back to doing TNG episodes with a fistful of datas. When people think of holodeck simulation episodes, this is one of them. They came up with a weird plot device involving Data being an android and having some of his memories leak into the holodeck. Okay, that is a reason for having a holodeck simulation go horribly wrong. And they have to do all of their stuff in the holodeck simulation in order to go back to life as normal. Or the bizarreness that passes for life as normal when you're on the when you are crew on the Enterprise D. At any rate, having to fight holographic simulations of Data, that got interesting. Now, as a general rule, in terms of like what you would have players do with this, I mean, throw players into a holodeck simulation and run with it is definitely a valid option. Because the majority of this episode is that. I mean, obviously you have people trying to figure out how to, turn off the holodeck because in theory, people should be able to just walk out and leave and, they're stuck there, which is a bit of a problem. So, what are the people outside the holodeck doing? Well, we start off with Picard doing his, Picard things and playing on that Resican flute, which is a priceless relic that he will never be able to replace if he accidentally breaks it. Actually, it's entirely possible that he had someone make a copy of it in the replicator because he doesn't want to damage the original. I mean, it's a reasonable thing to conclude anyways. But yeah, one of the key plot points was creating an interface between Data's brain and the ship's computer. Obviously, that went strangely and created a holodeck simulation based on the ancient West, which, of course, is based on old Earth, um, you know, prior to what in the real world we consider modern times. Okay, this is actually one of those things that's interesting because the fact that this was a period of expansion that was actually only a few months, and in the people's like, oh yeah, that was back in the 1800s, but realistically, the actual um proper Wild West was a matter of months because it was, you know, a period of rapid expansion, not um, people just living in established settlements. This was the edge of the frontier as the frontier was rapidly moving. And that's what made it such a transitory thing. Which is part of the reason why this gets revisited in fiction, is because it was a chaotic, uncertain, and exciting period of history. And something that you can't actually experience in daily life because it was something that was a dramatic cultural shift that you can't just go outside and look at. So, in fiction, including holo programs, it's kind of popular. Um, yeah, gets used in fiction way, way more than it ever existed in real life, though. But hey, as popular as it is in real world fiction, ha- it it would seem like something that would be a natural choice for future people to also consider interesting from a cultural perspective because, like I mentioned, it was a drastic, really fast cultural change. Anyway, though, so the program that was based on this has a tenuous connection to reality because it's more, fiction than actually attempting to properly recreate anything that happened in the Wild West. So they make up a whole bunch of characters. They make up a town. They make it vaguely similar to, real places. And of course, the people who are in the real world, the producers of the show, get to reuse a set in Hollywood that was not built for Star Trek and was instead built for something else and was just sitting around collecting dust, literally. Yeah, when you take a close look at this, it really, really feels like Hollywood set because look at this building here and you see that the building ends right here. Because this doesn't make sense as a frontage style building. It makes sense as something that keeps going even further. Anyway, though, because one of the things people forget about these Hollywood sets is that part of the reason why they have such low angle, carefully chosen viewpoints is so that you don't see where the set ends and the surrounding environment begins. They need to create the illusion that you're in a full town and not just a frontage that has a dirty road in front of it. And the reality is, a lot of these are really just a frontage. Like you see curtains covering all the windows because on the other side of the curtain, there's nothing to look at. And it would ruin the illusion if you could see through the window and see what was actually on the other side of the window. Anyway, that is actually something that you could put into a holographic simulation as a plot point. Because a holographic simulation doesn't need to be a 100% perfectly accurate simulation of reality. You could go with the idea that the people creating the holographic simulation had limited information to use to base the simulation on, and thus the simulation ends where the data used to construct it ended. So, you have a picture of a town, but the town is a camera facing north while on the main street. And thus the picture used as the basis of creating the town only has what the camera lens captured. And thus when the holographic simulation is created, there's pieces missing. Now, this is not to say that the people creating it wouldn't, attempt to make reasonable extrapolations to fill in the blanks, but it's also, see, this is something that you, as the person writing this scenario, get to have a lot of fun with. How you want to use this is up to you. Like, is it a building where you open the door and there's literally no interior and it's just an empty void? Or, the old attempt to open the door, find that doors seized and refuses to open completely. Attempt to break down the door, find that the other side of the door is a brick wall or a heap of rock or something, Those are things that have been done in fiction. Another option is to literally just not have the backside of the building even exist at all. Like walk around behind the building, it's like, oh, that was literally just a shell and hollow on the inside. Well, anyways, it's up to you what you want to do with that. You could even just go with the idea that they have the full building layouts, but because they're working from guesswork, the layouts are wrong because they don't actually know what the inside of the building looks like. They're trying to make something that looks right, but don't know. Anyways, also you could go with the whole like fictional characters versus recreations of real people thing. Those are very, very different things in terms of what you do with them in a story, because if it is someone who has no relation to any real characters, then the players in your story have no basis of understanding the character, and you as a GM need to use analogies to explain them. Like here you have your standard tavern wench who is uh, acting as a waitress at the bar in town. You know, that sort of analogy gives people an idea as to what a certain character is. And you can always do other things like, hey, this guy's the sheriff. He's an honest man, but mean as hell. That kind of thing. If you choose to make them similar to real people or draw analogies with real people, choose carefully because it will drastically influence what your players choose to do. Anyways, so Deadwood isn't a particularly interesting place. Like I said earlier, it's a random set that wasn't even built for this episode. So it's pretty generic for a Wild West simulation. The only interesting thing in the episode and how the episode used it was the fact that the gang of bad guys have certain of Data's abilities. Like one of them is super strong and, as strong as Data. So he can, like pick up a horse and throw it. Another one has incredibly fast reflexes. Give him a 6-shooter and, he can fire the 6-shooter literally as fast as is physically possible, because the fact that, as anyone who's ever used a 6-shooter knows, is that those things do have a limited fire rate, limited by how fast it's physically possible to cock the weapon and cycle the chamber without breaking it. Try to do it too fast, the machine will jam and stop working. Now, an android doing that super, super fast will be able to do it faster than a normal person will, but not necessarily as fast as you would think, because of the fact that you have the physical limitation of cycling the rounds in the chamber without breaking the weapon. Anyway, yeah. Also, though, is that the pistol-wielding member of the group having Data's reflexes and accuracy was also a problem, because Worf ended up having to do a pistol duel with him. Worf won because Worf cheated and cobbled together a temporary force field so that when Worf got hit, because Worf knew he was going to get hit, he didn't die. And that left his opponent open to a counterattack. Granted, it was a very small window for a counterattack because of what I mentioned earlier about reloading, because realistically in that scenario, the bad guy who is firing didn't actually plan to fire multiple times. He was confident in his ability to go with the one shot, one kill thing. And when that failed, he was unable to follow up on what he had been doing. At any rate, though, one thing that holodeck simulation episodes always need is, okay, one, you have a logic of why you're doing this, which is entirely dependent on why you as a GM are doing a holodeck episode in the first place. Okay, because there's a long list of reasons to do holodeck simulations, and as players, you don't necessarily know what the GM is planning, but as a GM, you definitely need plan. And I'm not talking about something with like every single thing planned out like the script to an action movie. No, 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 no. I just mean like general like ballpark direction, and you need to have ahead of time planned how what the player's goal is. What are the players supposed to be doing? Which, again, doesn't need to be minuscule detail, but in this case, it was basically just stop the bad guys, which is rather vague. And as I mentioned, it required Worf to beat someone in a pistol duel who had superhuman reflexes and was able to fire a pistol faster than he could blink. Now this is just cartoonishly silly, but whatever. Anyways, yeah, that's basically it though. Is because like the reason for this particular holodeck program, because to be fair here, doing a Wild West holodeck simulation would be fine. Doing a Wild West holodeck simulation with characters in it who have superhuman abilities that are not culturally appropriate for that time period is also fine if you- if you're giving your party the means to use Star Trek standard tech. Hey, you know what? Give the bad guys some edge to force the players to actually use it. Again, though, is that because it's a from an in-universe perspective, a fictional scenario, you can go really, really off the deep end having fun screwing with things. I mean, hey, I'm a big fan of the Oblivion movies. Those were some of the best sci-fi westerns I've ever seen because of the fact that they understood that having real stakes and real drama was important, but they also understood that it's a sci-fi setting with sci-fi nonsense, and you can't try to make it too grounded when you have sci-fi nonsense in the setting. Because, that the Oblivion movies had shapeshifters, they had force fields as a feature, and yes, I do believe that the Oblivion movies were made by people who probably saw this and got ideas. They did not just straight copy this. No, 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 no. They spiced it up a lot. But, the end result was quite good. And if you're doing a holodeck simulation, pulling inspiration from the Oblivion movies would actually be quite a nice idea. Because, it's set on a planet that's not Earth and somewhere out in deep space, and thus you have the option of having wildlife that doesn't exist on Earth. And that's another thing with this is that doing a Wild West simulation, you don't actually have to set it on Earth, because that's one of those things I kind of like glossed over earlier, is that it's interesting because of how unstable the time period was. You don't have um, well established rules and the ability to enforce the rules. And it's that lack of ability to enforce the rules that made things so chaotic. Is that, having a gang of 5 people with pistols might actually legitimately be enough people to take over a town by force of arms. Because, the local authorities and concerned citizens just didn't have the firepower to do it. Or, I'm not saying that was a common thing, just a thing that people had a legitimate fear of. Anyway, though, looks like I'm done here. It's one of those things that the sheer number of options makes the exact details of the source material largely up to you to choose what you want to use. And yeah, that seems like a good place to call this one. See you guys later.